elders with wisdom rise. Ancestors surround us, rise.
Hello, everyone. We're going to get started with our next session here in room 3. That's Fostering Jewish Resilience in the Context of Anti-Semitism with Caroline Kaufman. And before we get started, I just want everyone to please take a look at the How We Engage norms that helped guide our conversations here at Temple Israel. So I'll just leave those up for a minute so you have a chance to glance at them. And also, of course, want to give a huge thank you to all of our partners who help make our 25 hours of learning at Tikkun Zoom Shavuot possible. And with that, Caroline, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Emma. I appreciate it. I'm actually going to share some slides today. I'm an academic. I just can't help myself. Okay. Can everybody see these? And it's my strong preference that today we have a discussion as if you want to put things in the chat, if you want to raise your hand, there's no need to wait to the end to ask questions or to provide a comment. So as you've heard, the room you're in, the Zoom room, today we're talking about fostering Jewish resilience in the context of anti-Semitism. I'm Dr. Caroline Kaufman. Please call me Caroline. Right now, I'm affiliated with the Spirituality and Mental Health program at McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And actually, in the fall, I'm transitioning to a professor position at Bowling Green State University. So this might be my last Shavuot with Temple Israel. So it's really nice to be here with all of you. So I do have to give you a brief disclaimer. This presentation will include discussion images of anti-Semitism and associated forms of racism, discrimination, and oppression. And then I also have to provide you with a disclaimer that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily represent the views or positions of Temple Israel, McLean Hospital, Massachusetts General Brigham, Harvard University, Harvard Medical School, or Bowling Green State University. So who am I? I'm a clinical psychologist. Technically, my specialty, my training is in child and adolescent psychology. I describe myself primarily as an adolescent psychologist, which one time someone asked me, well, aren't you a little old to be an adolescent? That's true. I mean, I primarily work with clinically adolescents. I did my clinical internship, or what, if you think of the medical field, I did my residency at Yale University School of Medicine, Yale New Haven Hospital with a child and adolescent specialty. And then I completed a research fellowship at McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School in the Spirituality and Mental Health program, which ended in 2023. Since then, I've been a junior faculty member and psychologist at the university and the hospital. My broad area of research looks at the intersection of trauma, mental health, and spirituality and religion. But I have a specific area of interest as well in anti-Semitism and Jewish identity. I do some work with academic and clinical communities communicating about Jewish identity and anti-Semitism, both in professional psychology and also in more general communities. I've given a variety of academic talks. I went with the Jewish Federations of North America to speak to Congress about anti-Semitism a couple years ago and have done work with other organizations. I also have a variety of peer-reviewed publications about anti-Semitism. And I tell you all this not so that you won't give me a hard time or argue with me, but just to show my enthusiasm and my passion for this area. Okay, so part of my interest in this area, unfortunately, comes from my own experiences with anti-Semitism, which that's a full talk in and of itself. And I'm sure for many people in the Zoom room, that would be longer than an hour talk. But in 2018 and 2019, there was a series of, unfortunately, anti-Semitic graffiti in Fall River at the Jewish cemetery, and my family's graves were included in that anti-Semitic incident. And I had been researching and thinking about anti-Semitism before. I was in graduate school at the time, but it really lit a fire under me to try and understand what anti-Semitism is. And then also, in some ways, more importantly, how can Jews be resilient in the context of anti-Semitism? I'm checking the chat. No comments yet. Maybe they'll come later. So I like to, when I talk about anti-Semitism, I like to first think of Rabbi Taylor Swift. She's a very well-known rabbi. And she has this lyric I love. She says, I could build a castle out of all the bricks they threw at me. Every day is like a battle, but every night with us is like a dream. In my own work and in the context of professional psychology, I think it's very important to recognize anti-Semitism, recognize the stressors and the challenges that the Jewish community is experiencing and has experienced. And yet, at the same time, for me, there's an importance of focusing on joy and resilience, even in the context of suffering, because every night with us is like a dream. It is so wonderful. It is so great being Jewish. And I like to balance both. Hmm. Thanks for sharing. Cindy shared in the chat, grew up in Massachusetts in the 70s. Being othered was always present. I'm sorry to hear that, Cindy, and thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to begin with some definitions of anti-Semitism. You don't have to agree with these. These are the ones that I'm proposing here. So I'm going to propose the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and facilities. Resilience is defined as the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. I hope you'll see here that resilience is not simply an outcome. It's not something you achieve at an endpoint. It's a ongoing process and also an outcome. Can the link to the slide deck be posted? Jack, I actually don't share my slides because part of my livelihood is giving presentations like this, not in this case, but I'm sorry, I don't share the slides, unfortunately. But I hope, can everybody see them though on the screen?
Both definitions are readily available just by a search for IHRA, as well as huge arguments and debates about accepting these definitions, as well as I even start with the term anti-Semitism, which was coined by a Jew hater. And I think that our first step is to take back our ownership of what this disease, this cultural disease is, which is Jew hate. And it's renamed to erase us from the very naming of it, which was the intention of Willem Marr in 1879 when he coined the term to discuss removing Jews from the culture. So
Uh-oh, did I freeze or did Cindy freeze?
I think it might have been Cindy, unfortunately. Oh,
sorry.
Oh,
no,
Cindy,
you just froze for a
just
second.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Whether it's couched in anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, that we know that the source of this just is historically all can be traced back to the same things that are as old as Jews are. As soon as we became other intentionally from the greater as soon as we accepted the Torah, we became different, and that is a source of the hate, the misunderstanding, the ignorance, and the political scapegoating of us in every generation.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cindy. Appreciate it. And some of my colleagues do use the phrase Jew hatred or Judeophobia in their work. I tend to use anti-Semitism, but you're absolutely right. There's quite a bit of controversy in the field in different ways that people approach this. Absolutely right. Oh, I muted myself. So for some people, the more often I give this presentation, especially in more recent times, people want to hear more about what anti-Semitism is or isn't. And there's many definitions available in academic and public discourse. This definition from Fine from 1987 is actually the one I use most often in my work. And Fine defines anti-Semitism as hostile beliefs towards Jews as a collective manifested in individuals as attitudes, in culture as myth, ideology, folklore and imagery, and in actions, social or legal, discrimination, political mobilization against Jews, and collective or state violence, which results in and or is designed to distance, displace, or destroy Jews as Jews. Again, there's many definitions. This is the one I really like as an academic. You might be wondering more about resilience. I think we hear it a lot in the zeitgeist, and yet, from my perspective, of course, as an academic in a ivory tower, if you will, I wonder if we always know what we're talking about here. So, resilience is the ability to bounce back. In order to be resilient, you have to get dropped. You actually have to hit the floor to bounce back. And resilience, again, is about our ability to bounce back, to experience some decline, decrease some adversity, and yet regain our earlier functioning or improve our functioning. Oh, Cindy shared a really interesting YouTube video in the chat for people who are interested. Thanks, Cindy. There's a variety of ways in which we can be exposed to anti-Semitism, and I wonder if any of these will fit with your experience or the experiences of people you know. There's personal exposure to anti-Semitism, things like microaggressions. My first day of graduate school in Tennessee, I said, "Hi, I'm Caroline Kaufman." Someone said, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, people often think I'm Jewish." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Yeah, I have a big nose." And I was like, "Oh, geez, here we go." I define that as a microaggression. Social exclusion, not being invited into spaces or specifically being barred from spaces because of one's Jewish identity. Social rejection, being actively rejected from groups because of one's Jewish identity. Discrimination, being denied opportunities, experiences, privileges, rights, and even, unfortunately, violence. There's also what I call distal anti-Semitism, meaning it doesn't necessarily happen to you and your body, but you're exposed to it somehow. So perhaps anti-Semitic representations in media, and that could be media meaning the news, or even there's a show that some people really, really like called Nobody Wants This. And I think often the representations of Jewish women in that show are deeply anti-Semitic, and they really bother me. But they're distal. They're not happening necessarily to my body in the street, but they're a form of stress. Erasure or underrepresentation of Jewish identity not being covered, not being discussed. This, particularly as an academic, happens in multicultural courses. Checking the chat again. Someone's got a good comment. Even the representation of Jewish men in that show is limited. Yes, Cindy, you're absolutely right. Mis or disinformation about what it means to be Jewish. I can't tell you, and this may be true for all of you as well, how many times someone who's not Jewish tries to explain my traditions to me or what I do or don't do as a Jew, and that's not correct. Holocaust denial, and also violence. When Jews are exposed to depictions of violence against Jews or hear about it in the media through news, we can consider that a form of anti-Semitism. Would these microaggressions be true even if people don't specifically say Jew in their cruel comments? Um, so for an I'll give you an example. Um, one time one of my friends dropped $1 as we were walking. I said, "Wait, oh my gosh, you dropped $1." And she said something like, "It's good to have a friend like you because I know you always got your eye on the money." And I took that very specifically as being about my Jewish identity and stereotypes about Jews and wealth or money, but she didn't say Jew necessarily. And I do agree with Cindy here, Fern, that there's possibilities that people make a comment and might not say the word Jew or Jewish, but they could be a microaggression calling upon Jewish stereotypes. I want to just really underscore here that the personal and distal overlap very specifically in the context of current social media and news coverage. Whereas in times previously, we might have heard about a pogrom or even the Holocaust through newspapers with some separation. Now we have videos, we have pictures constantly on this thing that's in our hand almost at all times that really push these distal stressors of anti-Semitism into the personal. And as I hope we get to talk about today, potentially distancing ourselves or using social media or news coverage in a way that's effective can potentially reduce the impact of experienced anti-Semitism and distal anti-Semitism. I'm getting distracted because I see people are chatting in the chat. Here, let's check. Yes, and sometimes Cindy's absolutely right. People say or engage in microaggressions and they're not aware that they're microaggressions. They're not aware of Jewish stereotypes and not aware of the way they might come off. And this might be true in our own lives. Everybody in this Zoom room has likely said an offensive comment about someone else's identity and didn't know it was offensive or didn't mean to. And the same thing happens when talking about anti-Semitism. So there's a variety of consequences of anti-Semitism. We see worse mental health in individuals exposed to anti-Semitism, things like increased anxiety, increased depression in individuals, and also increased perceived stress. We see existential concerns higher among those who experience anti-Semitism, feelings of marginalization, fear, and safety concerns. We also see behavioral concerns. So, people who experience anti-Semitism or have a really deeply held fear of experiencing anti-Semitism, particularly anti-Semitic violence, might engage in what I call avoidance. So, not coming to in-person or even virtual Jewish events for fear of some sort of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic attack. People who maybe don't wear their Star of David or put a baseball hat over their yarmulke. Women who prefer potentially to wear a wig rather than covering their hair. And that's not to say every time someone wears a baseball hat, they're avoiding anti-Semitic violence or there's fear there. But for some of us, there may be some avoidance. Anti-Semitism can change how we act, where we go, how we express ourselves. It's not good.
But
And then also
Carolyn,
some
I don't want to. I want to participate, but I don't want to interrupt you because you're saying valuable stuff. So, do you want me to continue, you know, chatting rather than talking to you directly?
Cindy, I welcome any engagement and I encourage anyone else who has a thought or a comment to unmute, put it in the chat. Like, let's have a discussion.
Okay, I mean, I was up all night, so disclaimer, I'm very giddy, and my editing is there's no editing here, so I'm just gonna let you have it. But this is so healing for me because, as I said, growing up in Massachusetts, and I think this is also intergenerational, none of this was discussed. It was not named. It was how we lived as Jews being surrounded by unnamed hate that was just part of who we are. So much of my Jewish experience, and I think my generation of so many people who unconsciously internalized a self-hate or a distancing from Jewish culture has to do with having grown up with this and the previous generation, whether they were survivors or not, none of it wasn't discussed. It was almost like unresolved pain that was just passed down to a generation. So ironically, I'm finding as the world is getting worse for us, and I don't live in Massachusetts, and I live in places where there's a lot of Jewish representation. I'm finding it very healing to unpack this and to talk about it and to name it and to language it. And it's very interesting to me that you're discussing it in an academic way when this is my personal, deeply embedded pain, unnamed and unknown. Why did I feel this way? Well, it makes perfect sense. I was growing up a Jewish girl, obviously. Um, and I don't wear a Jewish star. I don't, I have my mezuzahs are inside my home. You can't, and I'm very aware of it, but that didn't just start. That is unconsciously, didn't even realize these are things that come from my childhood.
Mm.
So thank you.
Sure. Thank you for sharing, Cindy. Oops, I went forward too quick. These religious and spiritual concerns, we see among Jews who experience anti-Semitism a loss of dignity and lower life satisfaction. One thing I'm exploring right now with a couple of organizations, including Gesher Community Care and the Jewish Community Mental Health Initiative, are exploring if anti-Semitism results in spiritual and religious struggles. So potentially a loss of faith, doubt, poor religious coping, which we would describe as potentially beliefs that God wanted this to happen, God is punishing me. Oh, I'm trying to get to the chat. What? Come on, chat. There you are. Betsy, I appreciate your comment. I do want to make sure people have the opportunity to share and comment as well. So how can we increase resilience in this context? As we talked about, resilience requires that you get dropped. You have to hit the floor. So there's two ways to increase resilience. The first is interventive. After you've been dropped, how do we help you bounce back up? The second is preventive. Before you get dropped, how do we provide you with the skills or the resources or the supports so that when you get dropped, you can bounce back up? So that's how I think about interventions to increase resilience. Preventative, sort of before you get dropped, and interventive after you get dropped. Now, keep in mind for anti-Semitism and other forms of stress or challenges, you may get dropped several times in your life. And the skills you need at different stages of your life could potentially differ. So, the importance of a foundation. Now, this comes from, excuse me, all right, I lost my train of thought for a second. Okay, the importance of foundation. If you're going to get dropped, you want to have a bouncier ball in general, right? So that when you get dropped, you have the resources and skills to bounce back up. And in general, bouncier balls have better sleep, better exercise, diet, and interpersonal relationships. What I mean that as, if you as a person or a bouncy ball, let's say, get dropped, if already before you're dropped, you have really poor sleep, you're not moving your body, you're eating food that makes your body not feel so good, and let's say you're isolated or in the middle of several contentious relationships, it's going to be really hard to be a bouncy ball. So one of the preventive strategies we can engage in to increase resilience is making ourselves as bouncy as possible through these self-care and what we call hygiene strategies. This is a meme from Parks and Recreation. It's a woman who says, "I've been eating lasagna and muffins every day for 40 years and I feel terrible." And I love this scene. It's hilarious. And also, if you get dropped as a ball and what you've been eating is lasagna and muffins, two of my favorite things, it's going to be harder to be bouncy because those foods alone, not in the context of other foods, make it harder to function well in our bodies. So this positive, healthy foundation is really, really important for experiencing resilience in the context of anti-Semitism. So I'm going to use the sort of metaphor of an umbrella today. And an umbrella protects us from the rain being anti-Semitism and its negative effects. So access to a supportive Jewish community, you'll see on the lower left-hand corner, this is represented in research to be tied to resilience in the context of anti-Semitism. When we have access to a supportive Jewish community, actually there's even some research to suggest we might be less likely to experience anti-Semitism. And we see among young people that there's a lower risk of experiencing anti-Semitism among young people with more Jewish friends. And many of you right now, by being in the Zoom room, are receiving the benefits of having a supportive Jewish community and also providing other people in the Zoom room with benefits by providing a supportive Jewish community. And this is true every time you go to Shabbat services, you go to high holidays, you go to a book club, you go to Temple Israel. I'm not using this as an opportunity to raise money for synagogue, but you never know. You're helping to provide a positive environment, a supportive environment. Religious observance and involvement, we also find to be preventive against the negative consequences of anti-Semitism. People who are more engaged religiously and more involved tend to do better when they experience anti-Semitism. Social support is crucial. People who say, I see you and I see what you're going through. Very important. And this again is about building and having a healthy umbrella. Dan said, could you comment on Jewish anti-Semitism? As a student from K through 12 high school, I was affiliated with conservative shul, observed kashrut, attended services on all Jewish holidays, and suffered the disparaging comments of other Jewish students who said I was too Jewish. Yes. So Dan, you make a really, really good point. And that's why I underline, well, I didn't underline, I should have, supportive Jewish community. In some cases, Jewish community isn't supportive for everybody. In Dan's experience, also some experiences of people who are from the LGBTQ plus community, Jews of color, immigrant Jews, Jews with disabilities, may not easily find or as easily find supportive Jewish spaces, which is why, thank you for Dan's comment, I think there's a responsibility and onus on all of us to work very hard to make the spaces we're in supportive and kind, inclusive and caring. But there are times in which Jewish spaces are not supportive for everyone. Fern said, would anti-Semitism among Jews be called internalized oppression? I think, Fern, that depends. For me, I will tell you as an academic or scholar, I have almost no interest in internalized anti-Semitism. It's, for me, not the greatest threat I see to the Jewish community, so it's not particularly interesting to me. But I'll give you an example. I was on a committee where we were trying to address anti-Semitism within a professional organization. And one woman said, well, I don't want to sound like a whiny Jew. And I was like, whoa, hold on a second. And she had heard these stereotypes about Jews and how they communicate and maybe the things that they ask for, how they ask for them. And she had internalized that in the sense that it was impacting her behavior and impacting how she wanted to come off. And that was something we worked through as a group and discussed. It's not my main area of research, but there are times that we might internalize or believe some of the negative Jewish stereotypes that we experience. And that we're particularly at high risk of that, again, when our bouncy ball is not as bouncy as it could possibly be. Thanks so much. Okay, so positive representation is really important for our umbrella. And our umbrella, again, protecting us against the negative effects of anti-Semitism. Meaning, if you're the only exposure to Jews in media that you're getting is through Holocaust film or through very contentious media debate about Jews or Israel, it's not going to help you build a really, really strong umbrella. Having positive representation of Jewish identities, very important. And I found this very impressively among young people who have Jewish TikToks, Instagrams, Twitters that are just devoted to showing these really positive, joyous parts of being Judaism. And I personally in my life have made a great effort to follow and be engaged with Jewish influencers. And I love seeing on my social media page, I love fitness. There's a Jewish fitness influencer I follow, and he runs marathons in a yarmulke. And it means so much to me. And I love seeing that positive representation. Also, opportunities for self-expression, exercise, and creative activities. I'm a fitness nut. I'm going to recommend to every single person exercise if your body allows for it as a way to express yourself and also release stress. And creative activities. There's amazing organizations like the Jewish Studio Project that allow for sort of expression and processing through art. But again, these things help us to build a strong umbrella. So if and when we experience anti-Semitism, we're not going to get wet. Also, I think perhaps this is a Jewish stereotype. I think one of the major strengths of Jewish identity and tradition is humor. And there's actually research to show that humor is protective against adversity. Yay. Low substance use. I've given iterations of this talk to young people, and I really, really try and hit home on this one. Substance use is not effective for dealing with adversity or anti-Semitism. And you can see how someone might turn to this after a long day and a couple comments at work or experiencing things on social media. You're like, you know what? Let me have a beer or a drink to take the edge off. Let me use some marijuana to help me calm down. This is not effective. It does not work in the long run. And again, this is really, really important for me to communicate to young people. And for those of you who are parents or work with children or youth, substance use, not helpful, not even in relatively small amounts. Social media use. I put a question mark here because, as I referenced, there are positive representations of Jewish identity on social media, and maybe those can be helpful to build a stronger umbrella. But it's very difficult to sort through social media when you're just scrolling to know if what you're going to see is going to be helpful or harmful. There is also some evidence of compartmentalization, of putting certain difficult experiences in like a difficult box. And that box shouldn't be locked up. It shouldn't be in concrete. It's a box you open when you're ready. And what might happen if and when you experience anti-Semitism or another difficult event, you say, right now, I don't have the capacity to process that. Right now, I don't have the capacity to open myself up to the grief or the anger or maybe the guilt or the shame that that experience brought up for me. But I'm putting it in this box so that later when I have time, I'm going to open it and take a look at it. Also, spaces for carefree relaxation, really, really important. For me, those are Jewish spaces where I can laugh and be funny and not worry about many of these things and also be really silly. And it also allows me to compartmentalize and take space from, let's say, the anti-Semitism that I might have experienced or be experiencing at work, at my gym, when I drove by a protest and I saw a specific sign that really upset me. Monotasking. Over and over again, the research shows that we are not meant to multitask. We do best when we're doing one task at a time, focusing all our energy on that task at one time. And what I mean by that is if you're trying to answer work emails and then you're going onto Twitter and seeing what people are saying about, Josh Shapiro or something like that, it's going to be very difficult for you to be effective. One thing at a time. Saw something in the chat, so let me take a look here. Nope. Fern shared, as a child of a Holocaust survivor who's experienced complex PTSD, um, I find meditation impossible, but Tai Chi seems to be better in terms of lowering the cortisol. That is really, really amazing, Fern, that you've explored different things to see how they impact your body and your well-being, and you're finding something that works for you. I really, really love to hear that. And not everything works for everyone. So sometimes, as we talked about, the rain gets through our umbrella. And the rain can get through our umbrella for a variety of reasons. Maybe our ball wasn't as bouncy as it could have been, our umbrella wasn't as strong as it couldn't have been, or maybe it's raining really, really hard. Maybe there are even a couple pebbles in the rain, or the rain sometimes turns into hail, and it gets through and we get wet, meaning we experience negative and really negative consequences of anti-Semitism. So, what's pivotal here when the rain gets through is knowing when and how to ask for help. When I work with young people, I often make them write down 3 to 5 names and numbers of people who they can call, not when it's an emergency, but when they need to talk. We need to have a plan to know who we can reach out to. Now, for when I talk to young people, I bring it up to parents. Talk to your parents. This is what someone said to me at school today. This is what I saw on social media. What do you think about that? And for some of us in the room who are parents, we might need to be prepared for those kind of conversations. Also, our rabbinical staff and clergy. I myself have gone to staff and clergy at Temple Israel for about mundane concerns like a texting fight in a group thread, and also really big concerns about anti-Semitism. Rabbi, how do I understand this in the context of our religious tradition? How do I do X, Y, and Z when holding the pain of anti-Semitism? It's been very helpful for me personally. Psychotherapy may be an appropriate opportunity or strategy for people dealing with the effects of anti-Semitism. And I recommend that people try and seek out affirming mental health professionals. So if you're looking for affirming professionals, meaning professionals who understand Jewish identity, support Jewish identity, whatever that may mean. There's something called Gesher Community Care, which connects people with affirming mental health professionals. There's the Jewish Mental Health Community Initiative. I also work with them. And actually, on one of the most popular sites to find a therapist, Psychology Today, you can filter to see specialties. And one of the specialties on Psychology Today is Jewish identity. I know because I've clicked it. Let's see. Someone said that. Dan shared I should add that Jewish anti-Semitism was a major fly in the ointment with my first marriage to a Jewish woman. I'm sorry to hear that, Dan. As I said, counsel from religious clergy or leaders can be very helpful when the rain gets through. Making religious or spiritual meaning making. I gave you that example, Rabbi, how do I understand this? And Rabbi Andrew actually helped me to connect and find connection with my ancestors and with Jewish history with the anti-Semitism I was experiencing. I went to a talk about anti-Semitism recently, and there was a focus on connection with ancestors. And what one woman said, she said, what you're experiencing now or what you're feeling now is likely very close to what someone in your family or in your line has already experienced or has already felt. And for me, that felt meaningful and helped me to feel connection with my own family and with other Jews around the world. Social support. When you get wet, you want to ask for coffee. You want to go for a glass of wine. You want to say you want to go to services together. Can we go for a walk? Can we play pickleball together? When the rain gets through is when we want to reach out. And to have access to a village of supporters means that we also need to be willing to be a village. So when your friend texts you, or they call you, or someone at Temple looks like they're having a hard time, to reach out to them is really important. And it also means that perhaps you can reach out or you can receive the benefits of reaching out if and when you need it. Time in affirming spaces. I put affirming in bold here because, as has been referenced, not every Jewish space feels affirming for every Jew. Finding your affirming spaces. That could be a JCC, that could be a temple, a synagogue, Hillel, that could be Chabad, that could be your Jewish pickleball team. Finding those spaces for yourself and also recognizing that not every space is affirming for everyone. Again, when the rain gets through is the time to seek out positive representations of Jewish life and identity. When I give an academic talk about anti-Semitism and someone says anti-Semitic things to me, I don't go home and watch a Holocaust documentary. I go home and I watch Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm because I love those shows and I enjoy quite often the way they depict Jewish identity. And seeking out these representations of Jewish life and identity interpersonally via social media, via podcasts, TV, movies, music. I listen to quite a few podcasts about Jewish identity that are specifically positive. They don't really talk about the negative challenges, and I need those podcasts on some days. TV and movies with Jewish actors, Jewish writing, Jewish ideas, again, that's positive. Music by Jewish artists, very important for me personally. Expressive writing and journaling. Now, I hate to tell you this as a psychologist, someone who makes part of her livelihood off of giving therapy. There's some research to suggest that journaling could be just as helpful as psychotherapy. Don't tell too many people about that. Writing things down when the rain gets through. Being honest and vulnerable and expressive, just personally and privately. Let's see here. Saw another comment. No. Can you please recommend any of those podcasts? Yes, I can. Unpacking Jewish History. Oh, what is that other really good one? Ah, yes, Judaism Unbound is really good. Um, oh my gosh, there's one that's really great with a rabbi and then just like a regular layperson that's hilarious. Oh, I'm gonna have to. I don't want to get on my phone now because I'm compartmentalizing and monotasking, but I can look up some for you. There's some really great stuff out there. Self-compassion in the context of when you experience the negative effects of anti-Semitism. When the rain gets through is the time that it might be difficult to be your best self, to be your most patient, to be your most hardworking, to be your most diligent. And that's understandable. The rain's getting through. To be compassionate with yourself and even others in your life is really, really important. Maybe the day that you experience an anti-Semitic comment at work is not the day to refold all of your laundry or to do a deep clean of your apartment. Unless, of course, for you, those are coping mechanisms. Also, maintaining routine. Very, very important when you're experiencing the negative effects of anti-Semitism. I think for some of us, understandably, when we have something that knocks us off our access or the rain gets through, it's like, okay, I'm actually not going to go to that party tonight. I'm not going to do the yoga class that I was excited about. I'm not going to take the walk I always take with my dog in the afternoon. And we let our routine sort of get out of whack as a reaction to that anti-Semitism. I really, really encourage you to maintain that routine, to continue to engage in the things that matter to you, even when the rain gets through, because that's what helps us bounce back, to be a bouncy ball. It really can get worse, though. Again, substance use is one of my areas of interest. If and when we use substance use, particularly when the rain gets through, when we've been dropped, when we're trying to bounce back, taking the edge off via substances does not really work. We might feel a temporary relief of our symptoms, of the stress, of the tension, but substance use, as you may know very well, impacts our sleep, our appetite, all of those things that are needed to be a bouncy ball. And in the long term, it really doesn't work. I know very few people who, well, actually, I don't think I know anyone who said, I'm really glad I used alcohol during that time to get me through it. Also, the denial or minimization of feelings or experiences. There's sometimes generational tension here. Um, People of a different generation, I can think of my grandparents who, when I experienced anti-Semitism, who said, yeah, now get on with it, keep going, who couldn't really sit with the pain or were unwilling to, or perhaps the pain was so big that they pushed it down, they didn't discuss it, they didn't give it space. I have to say that doesn't typically work, according to the research. This doesn't mean you have to force yourself to talk about these things. This doesn't mean you have to force others in your life to talk about these things. But at the very minimum, providing yourself a space to reflect, to sit with it. Maybe you write about it. Maybe you just sit with a cup of coffee one afternoon and think, wow, that was really hard. That was really upsetting. Fern asked a great question. If we see our children using substances as a primary means of coping, is there anything we can do that they can hear? When people ask me this question, my first thought, Fern, is about modeling for our children. So saying to our kids, wow, I had the toughest day at work, or oh my gosh, I just got into a real big fight with my mom over the phone. Will you go with a walk with me to help me calm down? Will you stand outside in the backyard and look at the stars with me while I take some deep breaths? Will you sit with me when I feel really, really sad? To show them alternative ways of coping or moving through hardship other than substances and actively engaging them. Fern, I don't know anything about your situation, so I can't make too many recommendations. But if you see or notice your child turning to substances or using substances, can you interrupt and say, can we go for a walk? Can we talk about it? Could we go to the movies? Whatever, could we get a cup of coffee or a pastry? Whatever your family likes to use to move through these things. Really great question. The other thing that I really want to highlight here is that Heather, really good point. The very best tool I've learned is saying, instead of saying, I really shouldn't feel this way, is saying, of course I feel this way. Anyone in the situation would. Perfect, Heather. You could take my job as a psychologist. Worries me. Um, the other thing to keep in mind about anti-Semitism and other forms of adversity is that worse outcomes are associated with accumulated distress. So if we're continuing to experience anti-Semitism, it stacks on top of itself and it gets heavier and heavier and it tears more of our umbrella. It makes our ball heavier and less likely to bounce. And over time, the outcomes can get worse. This is an important point because some of us might think, well, I'll just get more resilient and over time it'll bother me less and I'll get a tougher skin. Actually, we don't see that in the research. We see that the more we experience these challenges, the more it can weigh us down. Um, I also think it's very important to think about how understanding, or it's important to think about how our values intersect with exposure to anti-Semitism and other upsetting events. One of my personal values is bravery or courage. And sometimes with anti-Semitism, that's been a challenge for me because I've said to myself, well, I want to be brave. I want to be courageous. I'm going to honestly expose myself to this situation that's going to likely result in anti-Semitism because being brave is really important to me. And there are times that has been a helpful, meaningful choice. I'm going to wear the symbol. I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to be myself. And there are other times when actually pursuing that value of bravery is not that helpful and negatively impacts my mental health. On a certain day, maybe bravery isn't the most important value of mine. Perhaps community is, or serenity is most important that day. Yes, it does. Now, finding purpose and meaning. I'm going to give you some potential
God.
prompt. Did someone say something?
Finish. Note taking is available. Move it.
I think they probably just didn't realize they had unmuted themselves. So keep going.
Got it. All right, cool. So here are some example prompts you might use when trying to make meaning of certain events, both related to anti-Semitism or otherwise, to explore the impact of the event. How has this experience changed me? And the answer to that question can be quite negative. And also to balance that with what have I learned? Have I learned how strong I am? Have I learned that my ball is not as bouncy as I thought it was? Or that my umbrella has some weak points? Have I learned that I have amazing friends? That there are people I can count on? Have I learned that turning to substances has not been helpful for me? Have I learned that Tai Chi is a better coping skill than meditation for me? How does this fit in? Sorry, my screen is boxing. How does this fit into your story? How have you overcome past hardships or challenges? It's very likely that when you experience anti-Semitism, it's not the first hard thing you've experienced. Even for little kids who come home and say, I experienced this at school. That little kid likely has not done well on a group project before, has had a bad sports game, has not made it on a team, who's had somebody else hurt their feelings. And to ask the child to reflect and the family to reflect. In the past, how have you overcome hard things? How have you moved through things in the past? And to remind the person and yourself, I have overcome hard things. I can get through difficult things. To reflect on your future. How will you incorporate this experience into your future relationships or behaviors? When I experienced that microaggression I told y'all about on my first day of graduate school, it was so upsetting to me that I thought, in the future, I'm really going to try my very hardest not to do this to somebody else of a different or similar identity. I'm going to think carefully about my words. And when I get feedback that what I said is offensive or rude or unkind, I'm going to take that to heart. I'm not going to do this to other people. For others that I've worked with who've experienced anti-Semitism and felt that pain really deeply and sharply, they've told me sometimes it makes space for holding the pain of others. related to anti-Semitism or not. Or it's increased their ability to be empathetic or their vulnerability. And they can bring those into their future relationships and behaviors. Also, practicing gratitude. This can be a hard one to hear after you've experienced anti-Semitism. Like, what? I'm supposed to be thankful now? But finding the things that you are thankful for, whether it's the friend that you text about the experience to be like, can you believe this happened to me? Or the moment you get home and you feel safe in your apartment and your dog or your cat greets you, or you see your partner making dinner for the evening, to find the things you can be grateful for, even if it's a sunset. Engagement as a source of resilience. Some of the therapeutic techniques that I utilize in my practice, whether related to anti-Semitism or not, is this idea that one form of coping can be serving others, finding opportunities to help and support others, which leads to self-discovery, what's important to me, what am I good at, and also can provide a sense of community. And in our community, there are opportunities for self-discovery and serving others. I really feel better when I hear that a family is struggling or I hear that a friend just gave birth. I feel better bringing over some food or door dashing some groceries. It allows me to serve others and it allows me to feel that sense of community. I'm in a village for somebody. I help my community. And through that experience, I've also engaged in self-discovery, noticing that I'm a really, really bad cook. I should not be bringing over casseroles to people. I should be door dashing groceries for everyone's safety and well-being. Saw something in the chat here. Some of the Gaza hostages practice gratitude. Yes, that's absolutely right, Deb. You're right. Some of them do talk about that. You're right. Here are some examples I use: supporting friends, family, and community members, volunteering, fundraising. If you're experiencing anti-Semitism or the negative effects of anti-Semitism or other forms of discrimination or other stressors, getting involved in organizations addressing those concerns can be really, really important. Since 10/7, 40% of Jewish Americans feel more connected to their Jewish identity. For some people, we're seeing an increased closeness or an increased seeking out of Jewish identity. That may be true for you. It may not be true for you. But again, this time and experiences of anti-Semitism could be an opportunity to learn about yourself. What allows me to feel strong? What allows me to heal? And how do I encounter and meet challenges? Community, finding or creating spaces for community and connection. One of the many things I love about Temple Israel is the circles that we have that you can just start. Book clubs, hiking, all sorts of poetry, writing, all sorts of cool things. If there's a space that you need, I would encourage you to see if you can go about creating that space. Whenever feeling downcast, each person should vitally remember, for my sake, the entire world was created. For me personally, I also turn to my spirituality and religion to cope with anti-Semitism. And when I feel downcast, I remind myself of this quote. Hashem created the whole world for me. And I think of that when I'm feeling down. I see some things in the chat here. I love the DoorDash approach with my kids moving away. I enjoy Instacarting them a mini birthday party, a small cake, pint of ice cream, balloon or flowers. Heather, maybe you can adopt me. My birthday's in November. Thank you for that 40% information, Fern said. I often wonder how many Jews are self-identified versus self-effacing post 10/7. I know people in both groups. Fern, that's a great point. And actually, some of my work with hospital organizations have found that Jews and Muslims are less likely to self-identify their religious affiliation when presenting for medical treatment now. Because of fear of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or having difficult conversations that they don't want to have when they're getting a flu shot, which I, as a psychologist, am very concerned about because sometimes people need specialized care based on their religious identity, but there are people who are not feeling comfortable sharing that right now. Jewish practices for resilience. Prayer. There is research to show that prayer facilitates resilience. I don't know if our rabbis are in the room, but I would imagine they would like to hear that. We can pray for strength, for safety, for dealing with uncertainty, for gratitude. I also think there's a really wonderful Jewish strength of Shabbat. It gives us a break. It gives us an excuse not to be on our phone or on social media, to not engage with some of the things that might be providing us with challenges or adversity. Shabbat is a wonderful time to take a break, to focus on spirituality, or just to focus on yourself and your family and your friends. I really appreciate also the Jewish example of mourning, that we have a tradition that values mourning and stopping to mourn, to rend our clothing because of grief. It is okay to experience grief, and sometimes the most appropriate reaction is grief or mourning. Now, I'm noticing we have just a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure that people, just in case people have been holding questions or comments, that people can share them. So I'm just gonna get through this pretty quickly. Here are my podcasts. Here All Along, Finding Meaning, Spirituality, and Deeper Connection to a Life in Judaism. That's a book I've really, really enjoyed. Some podcasts, Judaism Unbound, which someone else recommended. Identity Crisis from the Shalom Hartman Institute. Hutzpah, which I love. TV, Schitt's Creek, Grace and Frankie Seinfeld, Curb, Maisel, Broad City, Oh, Friday Night Dinner, which I love, Alex Edelman, all opportunities. So again, I'm just going to give us a chance here. If we don't have questions or comments, people can take a break before the next session. If there are questions or comments, I'd love to hear them too. Thank you for that. Hashkivenu is particularly helpful to me, Fern says. Let's see. Oh, really? I didn't know that about Judaism Unbound. I hadn't seen that. I love that. Cindy says, taking care of ourselves and increasing self-love has profound effects on the people around us. That's right. Any other comments, questions? Insults you can email to me. Deb, sometimes I write emails to people that really upset me, but then don't send them. Great. Really good one. I love that. Heather says, I've been doing a lot of work in leadership recently, and bringing our beliefs and values into consciousness has been a really powerful thing there. I've seen the footprints of this through your presentation. Yeah. And Deb says, then I look back and laugh. That's good. About her emails. I really like that, Deb. I write it down. Or my best friend lets me send text messages to him that were intended for other people when I'm very upset. Well, Emma, I may turn it
Yep, absolutely.
back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for participating and sharing your stories. Next, coming up in this room, we'll start in about 2 minutes with Ted Greenwood, understanding the upcoming Israeli election, and that will be starting in just a minute or two.